The St. Louis Zoo. Frequently cited as one of the best zoological parks in the country, and entirely free to the public, the St. Louis Zoo attracts 3 million visitors every year, and is the most visited attraction in the St. Louis region. This zoo has long been at the cutting edge of what zoos should be, from its efforts in conservation to its commitment to research and education. But perhaps more than any of these, the St. Louis Zoo has long been held as a model for zoo landscapes, showing how to best combine thousands of exotic animals from across the globe with the natural landscapes they call their new home. The story of the zoo begins shortly after the 1904 World's Fair, when the city of St. Louis fought to purchase a giant walk-through bird cage that was constructed for the fair by the Smithsonian Institute. The exhibit, the largest free-flight cage ever constructed at the time, was so popular that the city purchased it as a permanent exhibit. The flight cage, as a centerpiece, was one of the main reasons that Forest Park was chosen as the location of the new zoo. A zoo in Forest Park was by no means a foregone conclusion, though. Several other sites were proposed, although none could compete with the ample area Forest Park provided and the proven draw of the flight cage. City Park Commissioner Dwight F. Davis was one of the most outspoken critics of placing a zoo in Forest Park. His chief criticism was that constructing a zoo, especially one featuring the ugly animal housing buildings of the time, would ruin the natural landscape of Forest Park. After 3 years of debate, popular support overpowered Davis, and Mayor Henry Keel signed a law giving 77 acres of Forest Park to the St. Louis Zoo. The remnants of that debate, however, are still seen on the landscape today. Even at its beginnings, over a century ago, the zoo took steps to avoid the unsightly animal houses and instead incorporate the Missouri environment into the zoo. Nowhere was this more apparent than in the bear pits, which were only the second moated exhibits ever to be opened in the United States when built in 1922. By using a moat to separate the people from the animals instead of harsh metal bars, the zoo was using divisions that seemed far more natural, a solution that incorporated features of the landscape, rather than imposing artificial barriers onto it. But it was not only this that made the bear pit such a model for zoos across the world. The designers of the exhibit also took steps to make it feel at home in Missouri, incorporating the natural beauty of the region into the construction. The concrete wall at the back of the bear pits was not a flat concrete structure, but was actually made from a cast of the bluffs along the Mississippi, near Herculaneum, Missouri. While the bear pits have been recently overhauled, eliminating moats in favor of glass, allowing closer proximity to the animals, most of the historic cliff faces were kept as a reminder of the zoo's early commitment to creating habitats that feel more natural than exotic. These same building principles were applied to other early expansions of the park, like the hoofed mammal yards that opened in the 1930s. While these rock-like partitions might seem like something out of southern Africa, their inspiration was far more local. This section of the zoo was modeled off the granite outcroppings found at Elephant Rocks State Park, less than 100 miles from the city. These enclosures, fittingly known today by the name Red Rocks, exist largely as they did in the 30s, reflecting how the St. Louis Zoo was specifically designed not only to feel natural instead of artificial, but local instead of foreign. Even that famous flight cage, which throughout the years has been home to exotic jungle birds from across the globe, is now a habitat exclusively for birds native to the Mississippi River swamps, including those species found in the cypress swamps of the Missouri Boot Heel. The fantastical exhibit that prompted the zoo's existence in the first place is now committed to respecting the Missouri landscape. As new technologies were invented, the St. Louis Zoo dropped the animal houses it did have in favor of open-air exhibits that placed the animals in more naturalistic environments. Houses for apes and big cats were demolished in favor of landscaped outdoor yards with plenty of room for chimps and lions to roam around in. The amphitheater where sea lion shows used to be held has given way to Sea Lion Sound, complete not only with a new, more natural-looking amphitheater, but a walk-through experience that lets visitors encounter marine mammals up close and personal. Even now, the Primate House, one of the only original animal houses remaining, is being expanded to include an outdoor play area where children can climb up into the trees alongside the monkeys. Of course, natural environments are beneficial for the animals, who are capable of living their lives in ways similar to how they would in the wild, with plenty of room to roam and enriching tasks to engage in. But these natural-seeming landscapes are also for the benefit of the humans. People go to zoos to experience the allure of nature, to see magnificent creatures that we like to believe are wild, untouched by human civilization and industrialization. Nature is refreshing, an escape from the world of plastic and metal that has encompassed most Americans' lives. This helps us to understand why so many of America's great urban parks, including New York's Central Park, Chicago's Lincoln Park, and LA's Griffith Park, all have zoos of their own. Zoos are then, in some ways, natural extensions of the writing of Frederick Law Olmsted, a towering figure in American landscape architecture, and the designer of Central Park. Olmsted believed that the objective of a landscape was to provoke emotion, to immerse the visitor in scenery that was complex and gave them much to look at and investigate. This, Olmsted believed, had a restorative property, relieving the stresses of day-to-day life and improving visitors' moods. Zoos like the one in St. Louis accomplished this goal so successfully because of the complexity of the landscapes. The animals are constantly changing, acting in different ways that mean no two visitors will have the exact same experience in this landscape. Even successive visits can be completely different, engaging the visitor rather than having the nature just wash over them passively. This is part of why the natural feel of the St. Louis Zoo is so important. By turning to enclosures modeled off local features and using mostly native plants in the landscaping, visitors are not experiencing an exotic endeavor that takes you to a place far away, but a natural one that mixes the engaging joys of watching animals with the authentic park experience that opponents worried would be destroyed by moving a zoo into Forest Park. While the animals are all about the wild, the landscape itself tries its best to feel like a sincere encounter with not just any kind of nature, but the nature that one really encounters in eastern Missouri. Of course, this landscape isn't really natural. Not only are the animals not native, but great care has been taken to hide the inner workings of the zoo, unless you seek them out. For example, rebar designed to contain the animals has been shaped to look like bushes or vines in many places. Or take the Antelope House, the shelter for many of the larger mammals. This building is entirely covered by those red rocks, and while visitors would be more than welcome to head behind the scenes if it weren't for current pandemic restrictions, from the outside, all you see is rocks. Rocks which, like the bluffs of the cutting-edge bear pits, are made of concrete, just as artificial as a skyscraper or parking lot. While zoos might strive to be like Olmsted's ideal park, you have to remember that they are constructed to appear like nature, not to be the real thing. Even so, the St. Louis Zoo is still a landscape that provides people with the joy and the relaxation of the best parks. The design of the landscape reflects the region in a way that allows for suspension of disbelief. Maybe the visitor thinks lions and elephants do belong in Missouri. You peer around trees and into dens to get the best glimpse of an animal you can, interacting with the landscape in ways that you don't on a simple walk. And in doing so, you leave behind for a moment human civilization, returning to an interaction with nature that is more primitive, more wild. You escape all that humans have created, and in ways you can't experience anywhere else, become one with the landscape.